Yellowstone's plains are filled with colour, but by far what draws the most attraction are the grandiose geysers and hot springs scattered across the landscape. These vibrant springs are fueled by the fires below, reaching intense heats that would, at first glance, appear to be inhospitable to life. Yet despite their extreme temperatures, these boiling springs are teeming with microorganisms that give them their characteristic colours. The park boasts over 10,000 thermal features, including over 500 geysers, which shoot steam and boiling water into the sky at regular intervals. Yellowstone has the largest collection of hydrothermal features in North America, and one of the largest hydrothermal systems in the world. 60% of the world's geysers and hot springs are nestled inside the national park. There are 5 different types of hydrothermal features found across Yellowstone's range, although most are centered within or surrounding the Yellowstone caldera, where the bubbling magma below boils water that then rises to the surface. Others are outside of the most recent caldera, but still sit within the boundaries of the older ones that make up the park. Many of these features are steam-heated acid sulfate thermal features, but alkaline chloride and calcium carbonate ones are common too. These terms describe the features of the thermal pools, like the pH of the water and the types of minerals dissolved within. Hot springs, geysers, mud pots, fumaroles and travertine terraces are all common hydrothermal features found in the park, and each have their own defining characteristics. Broadly speaking, these hydrothermal features can be grouped into 2 categories: features with a lot of water, like geysers and hot springs, and features with very little water, like mud pots and fumaroles. Bubbling away in small, impermeable depressions lined with clay, mud pots are a unique feature of the park, although they're found elsewhere in volcanic systems. With no direct plumbing system to underground water, mud pots are instead heated by steam, which heats surface water that has collected in the depression. As the water mingles with the clay, it bubbles and spits, often with a heavy scent of rotten eggs. This stench is due to hydrogen sulfide gas, which is used by some microbes as energy. These microbes transform the gas into sulfuric acid, which further breaks down the rocks into clay. Mud pots come in a wide range of colours, as minerals found within the rocks mingle into the water and mud, creating a spectrum of pinks, beiges, and greys. These colourful pots are sometimes called paint pots, due to their variety of colours. Hissing and steaming as hot vapour escapes from small cracks or fissures are the fumaroles, steam vents. Fumaroles are evidence of active volcanoes and can emit a variety of different volcanic gases depending on the composition of the magma below. They exist when water boils away before reaching the surface, escaping instead as steam and other gases. These vents are incredibly hot, capable of reaching temperatures as high as 130 degrees Celsius. One of the most famous steam vents, or fumaroles, is the Black Growler. Located at Norris Geyser Basin, the Black Growler has been active since at least 1878, roaring to life as boiling hot vapor escapes from below the ground. Elsewhere, at a roaring mountain, thousands of fumaroles dot the hillside, their bellowing and hissing giving the area its evocative name. But though mudpots and fumaroles are fascinating, and even beautiful in their own right, the most breathtaking features of the park are its geysers and hot springs. Like fumaroles, geysers erupt with immense heat. However, unlike the steam vents, a geyser shoots superheated water well into the air. The largest geyser in the world, Steamboat Geyser, is in Yellowstone National Park, and when it erupts, those jets of hot water can reach over 100 meters high. Geysers, like hot springs, are heated by the fires of the earth below. But unlike hot springs, however, the plumbing that feeds geysers is constricted near the surface, growing narrower the closer it gets. Deep underground, the water can exceed temperatures of over 90 degrees Celsius, far past the boiling point of surface water. But pressure is heavy that deep, due to both the overlying water and the rocks surrounding it. This pressure prevents the water from boiling as it pushes down, keeping it in its liquid form, and it instead rises, borne upwards by the heat. Eventually, steam expands, increasing pressure at the plumbing's chokehold near the surface, until all those boiling bubbles trapped within finally break free. But the geyser hasn't erupted yet. As the bubbles spill out of the surface vent, the geyser begins to splash and overflow. This overflowing reduces pressure on the system, the same pressure that prevented the water from boiling when it was trapped beneath the ground. Now that the pressure is lifted, that water can boil, and it does so violently. Steam forces its way out of the vent, bringing with it all that boiling water, and finally, an eruption begins. Water races out of the vent faster than it can re-enter the geyser's plumbing system, and so the heat and pressure gradually ceases. When the system cools entirely, or the water reservoir is depleted, the eruption stops until heat, water, and pressure builds up again. Although the mechanics of geyser formation are near identical, each geyser is unique. Yellowstone has many geysers, both named and unnamed, and while Old Faithful may be the most famous of them all, each eruption is magical in its own right. Riverside Geyser, located in the Upper Geyser Basin beside the Firehole River, shoots outward at an angle. As the sun hits the steam and mist, it forms a shimmering rainbow in the air. Elsewhere lies Castle Geyser, named for the appearance of the surrounding rock. Shaped like the ruins of a medieval fortress, when Castle Geyser erupts, it gives the illusion of some grand cataclysm, bursting out of the remains of what was once the seat of a kingdom. But though geysers are breathtaking in their grandeur, they pale in comparison to the brilliance and color of Yellowstone's hot springs. Ranging in color from deep, serene blue to vibrant oranges and yellows, Yellowstone's hot springs are iconic, drawing visitors from all over the world. Like all the thermal features of the park, these pools of water vary widely in acidity and temperature, with some reaching temperatures of above 90 degrees Celsius, The intense blue color of some hot springs is us witnessing physics in motion. As sunlight hits the deep, clear waters of a hot spring, the different wavelengths of color scatter amongst the water, while others are absorbed. The wavelength our eyes perceive as blue is scattered the most, and so that is the color that we see. But blue is not the only color we see in the hot springs. In many, there is a rainbow gradation from reds, oranges, and yellows to even greens. Geologist Walter Harvey Weed was fascinated by these colors and wrote, "The vegetation of the acid waters is seldom a conspicuous feature of the springs. But in the alkaline waters that characterize the geyser basins, and in the carbonated calcareous waters of the Mammoth Hot Springs, the case is otherwise, and the red and yellow tinges of the algae combine with the weird whiteness of the sinter and the varied blue and green of the hot water to form a scene that is, without doubt, one of the most beautiful as well as one of the strangest sights in the world." These colors described by Weed are not formed by the scattering and absorption of the color spectrum, but rather are alive. Thermophilic organisms, bacteria, archaea, eukaryotes, and even algae have all been found in temperatures previously thought to have been inhospitable to life. In Yellowstone, many thermophilic organisms are found clustered at the edges of hot springs, trillions of them appearing in colonies that create thick bands of color where they live on microbial mats. Different thermophiles thrive at different temperatures. So as the temperature changes in the hot springs, so too does the color. Some of these microbes are reminiscent of what early life on Earth may have been like. Called hyperthermophiles, these organisms thrive above 80 degrees Celsius, offering a rare window back in time, suggesting that microbial life may once have existed in the boiling hot environment of a young Earth. Some of these microbes, the cyanobacteria, are similar to the earliest life forms able to photosynthesize. Cyanobacteria are still found today in the colorful mats and streamers of Yellowstone's hot springs, and millions of years ago, their ancestors gave rise to the atmosphere that allowed life to thrive on Earth. Yet, the existence of organisms that thrive at boiling temperatures was not always known. A 1963 paper by Ellis S. Kempner determined that there was no evidence for growth of microorganisms above 73 degrees Celsius. But Thomas D. Brock thought otherwise. Brock first began to believe that living organisms existed in boiling springs and geysers in the summer of 1965, and his goal was to do experiments on the upper temperature limits for life. This is what led him to Yellowstone, and the discovery of an organism that would change the future of biomedicine. In 1964, whilst traveling, bacteriologist and microbiology professor Thomas Brock happened by chance to visit Yellowstone National Park. There he overheard a talk by a ranger who identified colors in a thermal pool as blue-green algae. What interested Brock was not that it was blue-green algae, but rather the temperature at which it was not just living but thriving in. The hot springs and other thermal features of Yellowstone can exceed the boiling point of water, making them deadly to organisms not adapted to live at such temperatures. As mesophiles, humans would not be able to survive in temperatures that hot springs can reach. Though we are able to tolerate between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius, any higher than that and our bodies would begin to shut down. Anything not adapted to withstand the immense heat and sometimes acidity of hot springs would die, their proteins denaturing, becoming unraveled and breaking down. Because humans and other animals are unable to live at such extremes, and because microorganisms had yet to be discovered at such temperatures, it was believed that there was an upper limit to temperatures capable of supporting life. Thomas Brock proved that wasn't the case. Between 1965 and 1971, Brock took samples from a variety of springs, ranging in temperature from 70 degrees Celsius to over 90. He identified 4 pools, all in the White Creek area of the Lower Geyser Basin, and it was here that he began his fieldwork. Right at the very beginning of his fieldwork, Brock discovered a strange pink substance in a thermal pool he had dubbed Pool A. Later, he discovered this to be named Octopus Pool, and it was home to a pink, gelatinous, and stringy substance that existed in areas that reached between 80 and 90 degrees Celsius. Brock was certain that this was bacteria. While collecting samples in the fountain paint pot area, Brock discovered a bacterium previously unknown to science. He dubbed this new discovery Thermus aquaticus for its ability to withstand high aquatic temperatures. Brock submitted a sample of T. aquaticus, discovered in Yellowstone's mushroom pool, to the American Type Culture Collection, where the sample remains to this day. In 1967, his paper was published in the journal Science. In it, Brock concluded that it is thus impossible to conclude that there is any upper temperature of life. But that wasn't the end of the story. Thermus aquaticus still has a larger part to play. In the late 1980s, biochemist Dr. Kary Mullis was working on a more effective way to examine DNA molecules. At the time, scientists had to rely on a polymerase that wasn't as able to withstand the temperatures that polymerase chain reactions required, until the Taq polymerase was identified and isolated from Thermus aquaticus. These polymerase chain reactions, or PCRs, are used across the world to amplify strands of DNA. PCR tests have various uses in crime scene investigation, biomedical research, screening for genetic diseases, and the early detection of infectious disease. In 1993, Dr. Kary Mullis won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his invention of PCR. Thanks to a tiny organism discovered in Yellowstone's hot springs, we have efficient and effective PCR tests. A test you may well remember as having been used to detect COVID-19. Sometimes, although the world is very large, it can appear to be very small as we discover these surprising connections. Brock spent 10 years researching the microbial life of Yellowstone, and his contributions to science paved the way for not just modern biotechnology, but also the further study of microbial life. Though he passed in 2021, his work will never be forgotten. And Thomas D. Brock is not the only scientist who studied or is continuing to study Yellowstone and its fascinating organisms that happily live in the boiling pools, unaware that at one point they defied science. Located just 8 kilometers inside the northern entrance to Yellowstone National Park, the Mammoth Hot Springs are a striking collection of travertine terraces, created by a buildup of calcium carbonate. Nearly 100 springs are scattered over these terraces, some of which date back to the late Pleistocene. The heat source for Mammoth Hot Springs is unknown, but it has been proposed to be the magma chamber beneath the most recent Yellowstone caldera, or a smaller heat source closer to the hot springs themselves. The Mammoth Hot Springs are calcareous in nature, and it's this calcium carbonate that creates the terrace-like structure. As water flows, it deposits travertine, creating terraces and mounds. Individual springs may remain active for a few years before their plumbing becomes plugged, and new springs will occasionally spring to life along the same fissure. These springs are fed by a network of fractures and fissures that cut through rock, allowing hot water from below the ground to well up to the surface, carrying minerals with it. Though travertine is actively deposited at the Mammoth Hot Springs, other hydrothermal deposits of the sedimentary rock are much, much older. Areas in the lower and upper geyser basins also display travertine deposits, but these are old. These regions' thermal waters now contain silica, changing their composition. This means that something in the past had to have changed, altering the water's composition and leading to the lack of new travertine deposits. Contained within these older deposits sits a climate record, allowing scientists to read how the regional climate has changed over time. By measuring how much radioactive uranium has decayed to thorium, scientists were able to determine the age of travertine deposits within the caldera. Most of these deposits formed during short periods within the last 15,000 years, and what is even more interesting is that these periods of travertine being deposited coincided with periods of time that were known to have cool, wet climates on the Yellowstone Plateau. As increased precipitation from rain and snow runoff mingled with the source water of the hydrothermal system, it brought with it dissolved minerals like calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate, minerals necessary for the formation of travertine. The chemistry of these deposits changed over time, and analyses of oxygen isotopes shows that the oldest travertine deposits were formed from a glacial water source. The oldest documented travertine deposits in Yellowstone date back over 400,000 years, and are found at Terrace Mountain, south of Mammoth Hot Springs. The waters of the hot springs and the travertine deposits in the Mammoth area are very different to other thermal systems in Yellowstone. The Mammoth Hot Spring system remains reliant on magmatic heat, but its waters are cooler compared to systems located within the caldera itself. And these remarkable travertine terraces of Mammoth Hot Springs are rich with microflora, including the blue-green alga Spirulina labyrinthiformis. In his paper published in Microbial Ecology in 1977, Richard W. Castenholz studied the effects of sulfide on the blue-green algae inhabitants of Yellowstone's hot springs, focusing primarily on the colonies that thrived in the Mammoth Hot Spring region. These springs, he explained, are distinguished from others in Yellowstone by their higher calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate levels, but the most notable, to him, was the presence of soluble sulfide. The presence of these sulfide levels, he discovered, determined the type of blue-green algae found within the waters of the springs. In most regions of Yellowstone, Synechococcus lividus, or similar species, form flowing mats in water between 73 and 74 degrees Celsius. But pH plays an important part in determining what species takes hold. In water below a 5.5, or when soluble sulfide is between 1 to 2 milligrams per litre, Mastigocladus laminosus becomes the dominant blue-green algae in rapid or turbulent waters below 58 degrees. Quieter, calmer waters, on the other hand, remain the domain of Synechococcus lividus and Synechococcus minerva. Below 50 degrees, a variety of blue-green algae species occurred abundantly, thriving together. But in Mammoth Hot Springs, Spirulina labyrinthiformis was the dominant photosynthetic flora below 50 degrees, when sulfide concentrations were above 0.8 milligrams per litre. Dark bluish-green streamers formed as cylinders around the ascending water columns and bubbles, their long trailing ropes of filaments moving with the motion of the water. These algal cylinders were discovered in the spring-fed ponds of the upper terraces, Bath Lake, and Painted Pool. Most of these spirulina populations, when found in well-shaded areas or areas partially shaded by trees, were lush, dark green and thick. Yet in two springs, unshaded throughout the day, the dominant spirulina population was discovered to be a yellow-green colour. Blue-green algae in non-sulfide waters of hot springs had previously been shown to have inhibited photosynthesis due to a lower concentration of soluble sulfide. In Yellowstone, this appears to be the case for Mastigocladus laminosus and Spirulina labyrinthiformis. Castenholz suggests that the presence of sulfide selects for spirulina, which likely uses sulfide as a reductant in photosynthesis. Spirulina, then, is able to acclimate to various levels of sulfide in the waters of hot springs that it calls home, and its domination in sulfide-rich springs could be a result of a competitional advantage over blue-green algae that are less tolerant of sulfide. And while the travertine terraces of Mammoth Hot Springs draw visitors, the most iconic of all is the Grand Prismatic Spring, the largest hot spring in the United States and the third largest hot spring in the world. Located in Midway Geyser Basin, the Grand Prismatic Spring spans 60 to 100 meters in diameter, reaching nearly 120 feet deep. Located in Midway Geyser Basin, the Grand Prismatic Spring spans 60 to 100 meters in diameter, and is rich with all the colours of the rainbow. Rusty red and orange line the outer edges of the hot spring, branching out into tributaries and runoff teeming with life. Steam rises from the deep blue centre, which fades into a brilliant green and yellow closer to the edge. These different colours indicate not just different temperatures, but also the different thermophiles that live in the different zones. These pigments that we see that colours the spring are produced by bacteria, and they include chlorophylls and carotenoids. Photosynthetic organisms like algae and cyanobacteria produce chlorophyll, which produces green, yellow, and even purple colours. Carotenoids, on the other hand, are used by phototrophic bacteria to harvest light, and they produce yellow, orange, and red. When the colours change, the microbial community has changed as well. Though thermophiles thrive in their depths, for us the hot springs mean certain death. Since the park first opened, 22 people have lost their lives to these springs. Though these incidents are rare when you account for the millions of visitors that Yellowstone sees each year, and the fact that it became a national park in 1872. Yet these waters, deadly to touch but brimming with life, have so much to offer us. They've provided scientists with the tools to improve biomedicine and offer a window back in time to understand how the climate has changed. But they can offer something else too. An understanding of life's origins, not just on Earth, but on other worlds, in other galaxies. Nearly 4 billion years ago, Earth was inhospitable, hot, wet, lacking oxygen, and completely barren of life as we know it. But life finds a way. Today, deep-sea hydrothermal vents and terrestrial hot springs provide us with an idea of what a young Earth might have looked like, and what life forms may have been present. Thermophiles, and extremophiles in general, come in 3 distinct flavours, but the oldest are the archaea. Thermophilic organisms thrive at temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius, but the archaea take it even further. Hyperthermophiles, these ancient organisms love temperatures higher than 80 degrees Celsius, and both are found in terrestrial hydrothermal vents like those in Yellowstone National Park. Anna Louise Reisenbach and Margaret L. Rising suggest that hyperthermophilic organisms were uniquely situated to thrive in Earth's primordial state, due to their ability to withstand such extreme temperatures, though they note that theories on this subject are hotly debated. The origin of life is tantalizing and elusive. There are many theories, from seeded Earth to deep-sea hydrothermal vents, and even primordial soup. Reisenbach and Rising conclude that the high-temperature conditions of a primordial Earth favoured thermophiles, which could have taken advantage of geochemical energy and evolved into something that kick-started life as we know it on Earth. Something that might look similar to life forms found in the hot thermal pools of places like Yellowstone. If life did arise under these conditions, and if that life was similar to the life that we see in these thermal pools, then maybe, just maybe, there is life elsewhere in the galaxy. The hydrothermal features of Yellowstone may provide us with the key. These pools are gateways to a world of microorganisms that thrive in the extremes. Microorganisms that one day may be found on another planet. Astrobiology is the study of life across the universe, not simply limited to the confines of our terrestrial home. Our neighbour Mars, the red planet, likely once have held liquid water. And like the thermal pools we recognise on Earth, that liquid water may once have been hot and teeming with life. There is evidence for ancient hydrothermal features on Mars, and further afield, we've seen geysers on the moons Europa and Enceladus. Mars has long been a focus in the hunt for life outside of our galaxy. But astrobiologists don't only look at the data from the Martian surface. Scientists have compared the fossil record of Earth's thermophiles to rocks found on Mars, hoping to find evidence of microbial life. But looking for life outside of Earth is difficult, and so we must rely on examples found closer to home. Thus, we turn to the hot springs, in hopes that understanding how life arose on Earth will allow us to discover life somewhere else. Because the hydrothermal features of Yellowstone are abundant with modern examples of early life forms, and show how these organisms can thrive in extremes, astrobiologists can gain valuable insight into how life might look elsewhere. And if we do find life somewhere in the stars, it's most likely going to be microorganisms living in extremes. But life is fragile too, even when it thrives in temperatures beyond what humans can tolerate. The preservation and protection of these thermophiles and their environments is so important for the future of science. It's vital that we protect these organisms, these resources, and these features, because if we don't, we could lose so much. We wouldn't just be losing natural splendor and beauty, we would be robbing future generations. So long as research continues and these areas are protected, we might one day discover life forms that exist beyond our blue planet and beyond the boiling point.